Please don't leave. The little black girl cried to the biker as a locked panel closed behind the acid tanks. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was a typical evening in a small, quiet town. The streets were nearly empty, with only a few cars driving down the damp roads. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the sound of the occasional thunder rumbled in the distance. But amidst the calm, there was a sense of unease that gripped the small biker bar at the edge of town. Inside, the usual crowd of leather-clad bikers were gathered, enjoying their drinks and swapping stories, unaware of the chaos that was about to unfold. At the far end of the bar, a figure emerged from the shadows. A little girl, no older than 8 or 9, her clothes torn and her face streaked with tears. She ran into the room, her breathing frantic, her small hands clutching at the doorframe. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her voice trembled as she cried out, "Please, don't leave. They've got my mom. They took her." The bar fell silent as every biker in the room turned to look at her. The leader of the group, a man known as Jake Hawk, was the first to react. His face, weathered by years of riding, softened with concern as he stood up, his boots scraping against the floor. Without a second thought, he stepped toward the girl. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low but firm. The girl's sobs filled the room as she pointed toward the back of the bar, her voice barely a whisper. "They took her to the warehouse, the one with the acid tanks. They're going to hurt her." Jake's heart sank as he processed her words. He had seen his fair share of danger, but this felt different. This was a child, and someone had put her in harm's way. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice tight with anger. The girl's trembling hands pointed again, but this time, she was too afraid to speak. "It's the people who control the town," she said, her voice barely audible. "They want her for something bad." Jake turned to his crew, his eyes hardening with determination. "We don't leave anyone behind, especially not a kid. We're going in." The bikers, though reluctant to stir up trouble, knew better than to question Jake. They had followed him into danger countless times before, and they would do so again. Within minutes, the group was on their bikes, roaring out of the bar and into the night, their engines echoing through the empty streets. As they sped toward the warehouse, Jake's mind raced. What could these people want with a woman? And why had they involved a child? The answers were unclear, but one thing was certain. No one was going to hurt this girl, and no one was going to get away with it. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark, and its doors shut tight. But the bikers were undeterred. As they pulled up to the entrance, they knew the real fight was just beginning. I can feel the tension rising as Jake Hawk and his crew of bikers approached the dark, foreboding warehouse. The roar of their engines echoed through the desolate streets, the sound of determination and urgency. Their minds were focused on one thing: rescuing the woman the little girl had begged them to save. The warehouse was surrounded by an eerie silence, its windows dark and its door tightly shut. There were no signs of life, but they knew better than to assume it was empty. Jake's eyes scanned the building, his pulse quickening. He felt a deep, gut-wrenching feeling that something was wrong. As he and his crew dismounted their bikes, the cold night air bit at their faces, but their determination burned hotter than ever. "Stay sharp," Jake ordered his crew, his voice steady but urgent. The bikers moved in quickly, surrounding the warehouse and silently making their way to the back door. They knew the people they were up against weren't your average criminals. These were dangerous men with no qualms about hurting anyone who stood in their way. As Jake reached for the door, his fingers brushed against the cold metal. He paused for a moment, listening for any sound from inside. All he could hear was the faint hum of machinery. They were too late to catch them by surprise, but they weren't backing down. Jake signaled to his crew, and with a swift motion, he kicked the door open. The room inside was dimly lit, the heavy smell of chemicals and old equipment filling the air. It was a stark contrast to the warm, inviting bar they had just left. The warehouse was a labyrinth of rusting pipes, old crates, and machinery that seemed abandoned long ago. But there was no time to be distracted by the surroundings. Jake's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of the woman and the little girl. As they moved deeper into the warehouse, they finally spotted a figure in the distance. Someone tied to a chair, their body slumped, and their head hanging low. It was her, the woman. Jake's heart sank as he recognized the same face the little girl had described. But there was no sign of the child. "Spread out," Jake shouted. The bikers fanned out, carefully checking every corner of the room. The tension was unbearable as each biker searched for the missing girl, knowing time was of the essence. As they moved through the shadows, a door at the far end of the warehouse creaked open. Jake's heart skipped a beat. This was it. He signaled to his crew, and they rushed toward the door, their footsteps silent but determined. Inside, the room was even darker. The only light came from a single bulb hanging overhead. And there, in the far corner, was the little girl. She was huddled on the floor, her hands covering her face, trembling. The moment Jake stepped into the room, her head snapped up. Her eyes widened in disbelief and relief. "You came," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Jake's heart ached as he rushed to her side. "It's okay, kid. We're not leaving you here. You're safe now," he said, his voice soft but firm. He knelt down and gently pulled her into his arms, holding her close. The fear that had been written all over her face slowly faded as she clung to him, finally feeling the safety she had so desperately needed. The rest of the crew gathered around, ensuring the woman was stable and untied. But Jake's mind was already racing. Who were these people? And why had they gone to such lengths to hurt this family? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps coming from behind them. Jake's instincts kicked in. "Get ready," he hissed to his crew, as the bikers swiftly positioned themselves. They knew this wasn't over yet. The real fight was about to begin. I can feel the tension in the air as Jake Hawk and his crew stood in the dim light, surrounded by the cold metal walls of the warehouse. They had rescued the little girl, and the woman was safe, but the danger was far from over. The faint sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, getting louder with each passing second. Jake's instincts told him this was just the beginning. He quickly turned to his crew, his voice low but filled with authority. "Get ready. They're not going to let us walk out of here so easily." The bikers moved into position, each one taking cover behind the crates and machinery scattered throughout the warehouse. Their hands hovered over their weapons, but they knew they couldn't act unless provoked. The door to the room where they had found the little girl was still ajar, and through the crack, Jake could see movement. A figure appeared in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a black leather jacket with the emblem of a skull on the back. He wasn't alone. Two more men emerged from the shadows, their faces hidden beneath dark masks. They were armed, their hands gripping rifles with deadly intent. Well, looks like the little family has some visitors," the first man sneered, his voice gravelly, as he stepped further into the room. "You bikers have no business here." Jake's grip tightened on the handle of his motorcycle club's trusted bat. "This is our business now," he said firmly, stepping forward with purpose. "We're taking the girl and her mother, and if you stand in our way, you'll regret it." The tension in the room was palpable. The men didn't seem to back down, but Jake wasn't about to let this go. He knew they couldn't fight this battle here, not with the woman still weak and the girl in a state of shock. "You don't want to do this," Jake added, his voice calm but unwavering. "The last thing you want is a fight with a group like us." The masked man chuckled, his laugh echoing in the hollow warehouse. "You think you can intimidate us with your bikes and your leather jackets?" he taunted, taking another step closer. "You're just a bunch of nobodies. We run this town." Jake's eyes narrowed. He could see that the man wasn't bluffing, but that didn't matter. Jake and his crew had been through worse. "Maybe you do run this town," Jake said, his voice low and dangerous. "But tonight, you're going to learn that some things are worth fighting for." With that, the tension broke. The first shot rang out, piercing the silence of the warehouse like a lightning strike. It was followed by a flurry of movement as Jake's crew and the men who had been holding the woman and child captive reacted swiftly. The bikers dove behind crates for cover, the sound of gunfire and shouting filling the air. Jake, always the strategist, moved fast. He dodged behind a stack of crates, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of the woman or the girl. He couldn't afford to lose them now. His heart raced as he kept an eye on the three men who were now surrounding them. The standoff was getting more intense by the second, and Jake could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He glanced over at his crew. "Hold your ground," Jake ordered, his voice sharp. "We need to get out of here, but we're not leaving without them." One of the bikers, a giant of a man named Bear, moved forward with ease, his rifle raised. "I've got your back, Jake," he muttered, his eyes trained on the men. The sound of footsteps getting closer made Jake's heart race. He didn't have much time. The bikers had to move fast if they were going to escape with the woman and the girl. The masked man moved closer, his rifle aimed at Jake's crew. He wasn't giving up without a fight, and neither were the bikers. In that moment, Jake knew that the battle ahead would test everything they had. They had come for a rescue, but they were about to be plunged into a war that would change their lives forever. I could feel the air thick with tension as the bikers crouched behind cover, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning every inch of the dark warehouse. The situation had escalated quickly. What was supposed to be a rescue mission had now turned into a full-on standoff with armed men determined to stop them at any cost. Jake Hawk, ever the leader, kept his focus sharp. His mind raced with calculations. He had to think fast. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but the bikers weren't just any group of men. They were family, and nothing would break that bond, not even a room full of armed thugs. "Stay down and stay calm," Jake hissed to his crew. "We need to move fast." The first shot had already been fired, but Jake wasn't about to let it be the last. His eyes darted from one biker to the next, checking that they were all in position, ready to take action. The little girl and her mother were still in the line of fire, and Jake knew they couldn't afford to wait much longer. The sound of the gunfire echoed through the vast space of the warehouse, the sharp crack of bullets hitting metal and wood ringing in their ears. Jake gritted his teeth, gripping his bat tightly. The bikers had the element of surprise on their side, but the clock was ticking. They needed a plan fast. "Bear, move to the left," Jake shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. "Phantom, take point. Crow, keep your eyes on the rear. We're getting them out of here." The bikers responded immediately, moving with practiced precision. They had done this countless times before, but this time, the stakes were higher. The lives of the little girl and her mother hung in the balance. Jake's eyes locked on the masked man who had been taunting them earlier. The man was inching closer, his rifle raised, ready to take another shot. Jake didn't hesitate. He sprang into action, charging forward with the speed and fury of a lion. In a blur of motion, he closed the distance between himself and the masked man, slamming his bat into the side of the man's rifle. The rifle flew out of his hands, clattering to the ground. The man staggered backward, momentarily stunned, but Jake wasn't about to give him a chance to recover. With a swift punch, Jake knocked the man to the floor, his face hitting the concrete with a sickening thud. "Stay down," Jake growled, his voice low and threatening. The bikers continued to move, each of them taking out the other men with brutal efficiency. Bear and Phantom made quick work of the two thugs near the back of the warehouse, their massive bodies bulldozing through the opposition. Crow, ever vigilant, kept watch over the woman and the girl, making sure they stayed safe. The bikers were unstoppable. The sound of battle continued to rage around them, but Jake's focus remained on one thing: getting the woman and the girl out alive. He ran toward the far corner of the warehouse, where the girl and her mother had been tied up earlier. The woman was barely conscious, her body slumped against the chair, but the little girl was wide-eyed with fear. Jake knelt down beside her, his heart aching at the sight of the terror in her eyes. "You're safe now," he reassured her, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're getting you out of here." The girl's trembling hands gripped his jacket, and for a moment, Jake saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You promised," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You promised you would save us." Jake nodded, his jaw set with determination. "And I always keep my promises." The sound of footsteps approaching snapped him out of his thoughts. He stood up, ready for whatever came next. The door at the far end of the warehouse slammed open, and a new group of armed men stormed in, their rifles raised. Jake's heart pounded as the situation quickly escalated again. This wasn't over. He signaled to his crew, and they sprang into action once more, their movements coordinated, swift, and deadly. "We're getting out of here, no matter what," Jake said, his voice steely with resolve. "Make sure they don't follow us." The bikers fired back, providing cover as Jake scooped up the girl and her mother. carrying them to safety. The warehouse doors loomed ahead, and the night air felt like a breath of fresh air. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. The battle was far from over. They still had a long road ahead, and more enemies to face. But one thing was certain. They were family, and they would fight for each other, no matter what. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me as we sprinted toward the exit of the warehouse, the sound of gunfire and chaos still echoing in the distance. The bikers were moving with a sense of purpose, each one knowing their role in getting the woman and the girl to safety. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that we weren't out of danger yet. We had managed to take out the men guarding the warehouse, but there were still others out there, more waiting for us to make a mistake. As we neared the door, I glanced over at the little girl, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She was holding onto my jacket like it was the only thing keeping her grounded in this nightmare. I promised her I would get her out, but I couldn't help but wonder if we were too late. The sound of the Harley engines roared outside, and I signaled to my crew. We had to move, and we had to move fast. There was no time to waste. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and we stepped out into the cool night air. The sight of the bikes was a welcome relief, familiar, comforting. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We had gotten the girl and her mother out, but now we had to get them to safety. The road ahead was still full of danger. As we made our way to the bikes, I saw a shadow move in the distance. A car, black, sleek, with tinted windows, was parked near the street. I could feel my heart race. Something wasn't right. The car's headlights flickered on, and I could hear the low hum of its engine as it began to move toward us. My instincts kicked in, and I immediately stepped forward, raising my hand to stop the others. "Get ready," I muttered, my voice low and serious. The car was coming closer, and I knew we couldn't afford to get caught in the open. I motioned to my crew to spread out, taking cover behind the bikes and the nearby structures. The car stopped a few feet away from us, its engine idling in the quiet night. My eyes locked onto the tinted windows, watching for any sign of movement. The last thing we needed was a surprise attack. I could feel the tension building, the air thick with anticipation. And then, the car door opened. Two men stepped out, both armed, both looking like they meant business. One of them was tall, with a scar running down his cheek, his eyes cold and calculating. The other was shorter, stockier, with a shaved head and a look of pure menace. "You made a mistake," the tall man said, his voice sharp. "This is our town, and you're not leaving it alive." I clenched my fists, my heart pounding in my chest. These guys weren't here to negotiate. They were here to end this. But we weren't backing down. Not now. Not when we were so close. "You're not getting away with this," I shot back, my voice steady. "We're leaving, and you're not going to stop us." The shorter man snorted, raising his gun, and that's when everything exploded. The sound of gunfire rang out, and I barely had time to react. I dove for cover behind one of the bikes as the bullets whizzed past me. My heart raced, and my mind went into overdrive. We couldn't let them pin us down. "Take them out," I shouted to my crew. The bikers responded immediately, drawing their weapons and firing back. The fight was on. I could hear the screams of the woman and the little girl in the distance, but I couldn't let that distract me. We had to fight our way out of here. The bikers moved with precision, returning fire, while others raced toward the car, trying to flank the attackers. The noise of the battle was deafening, but I kept my eyes on the men. The taller one was hiding behind the car, taking cover and firing sporadically. The shorter one was moving to the left, trying to circle around. I knew if we didn't act quickly, we'd be overwhelmed. I signaled to Bear, who was nearby, and nodded toward the shorter man. Bear understood immediately, and with a grunt, he charged forward, drawing his gun and firing. The shot hit its target, and the shorter man went down with a thud. That was one down. The tall man, seeing his companion fall, panicked and tried to make a run for it. But it was too late. Jake moved fast, cutting off his escape route. The tall man's eyes widened in fear as Jake raised his weapon, ready to end this. "You're not going anywhere," Jake said coldly. The man tried to beg, but Jake didn't give him the chance. One shot, and it was over. The fight was done. We had won, but at what cost? My heart was still racing as I looked over at the little girl, who was huddled behind one of the bikes. Her face was pale, but she was safe. "For now, we're getting out of here," I said, my voice low but filled with resolve. The bikers nodded in unison. We had come for a rescue, and we weren't leaving empty-handed. We mounted our bikes, ready to ride, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The fight was far from over, and this town had just become our battleground. I could feel the weight of the night pressing on me as we rode out of the warehouse, the roar of our engines cutting through the tense silence. The battle had been fierce, but now we had the woman and the little girl with us, both safe, at least for the moment. I glanced over at the girl as she clung to the woman's side, her wide eyes still filled with fear. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The sun was beginning to rise, casting an eerie orange glow across the horizon as we sped down the deserted highway. The wind whipped past us, and for a moment, I thought we might actually make it out of this. But I knew better. I knew the people we were up against wouldn't stop. Not until they had what they wanted. Keep your eyes open. I called out to the crew, my voice low but firm. We're not safe yet. The bikers nodded in unison, each one scanning the road, alert to any potential danger. We had no idea what we were up against, but I was sure of one thing. This was only the beginning. We rode in formation, the sounds of our engines filling the air, but the weight of the situation was heavy on all of us. The woman was still shaken, and the little girl clung to her like a lifeline. The girl hadn't said much since we left the warehouse, but I could see the relief in her eyes as she looked out at the world passing by. She was still scared, but at least she knew she wasn't alone anymore. We took the back roads, avoiding the main highways, where we could easily be spotted. But even on these quiet roads, I knew there was no escaping the truth. They were coming for us. The sound of another engine approaching from behind suddenly cut through my thoughts. I glanced over my shoulder, and sure enough, there was a car gaining on us. It was sleek, black, and moving fast. The headlights cut through the darkness, and I could see the outline of a figure in the driver's seat. My heart sank. I didn't have to guess who it was. The car was too familiar. It was the same car that had been parked outside the warehouse. The same one that had tried to stop us earlier. It's them, I muttered under my breath. They're still on us. The bikers didn't need to be told twice. We all revved our engines, pushing the speed to its limits. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as the car continued to close in. The road ahead twisted and turned, but we were used to this. We were used to the chase. The car behind us stayed close, its engine roaring as it matched our pace. The driver wasn't giving up. I could hear the tires screeching as they attempted to pass us. I pushed the throttle harder, the wind slamming against my face as we sped faster. The little girl's eyes were wide, and I could hear her whispering to her mother, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to hear them to know she was terrified. Stay close. I shouted to the crew. We're getting out of here, no matter what. The bikers responded in kind, leaning into the curves of the road, pushing their bikes to their limits. The car behind us swerved, trying to block us in, but we were faster, weaving in and out of the road's sharp bends. But the car was persistent. The headlights stayed glued to our backs, and I could feel the pressure building as the car continued to tail us, refusing to give up. We need to lose them, I said through gritted teeth. We need to take a shortcut. I signaled to Bear, who was riding at the front. He nodded, and we veered off the main road, taking a sharp turn onto a narrow, winding path that led deeper into the woods. The car followed, but it wasn't made for this kind of terrain. The gravel road was rough, and I could hear the car's tires skidding as it tried to navigate the tight turns. We had the advantage, but I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep it. The road through the woods seemed to stretch on forever, but there was no sign of slowing down. We were pushing our bikes to their limits, but the car was still right on our tail. It was only a matter of time before they figured out a way to catch us. My eyes darted between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, watching the car close in once more. Not much further, I muttered, my grip tightening on the handlebars. Just as I thought we might be trapped, a break in the trees appeared ahead. A wide open field stretched out before us, and I knew that if we could make it there, we'd have a chance to escape. Now, I yelled, and we all gunned our engines, tearing through the woods and heading straight for the open field. The car behind us tried to follow, but it wasn't fast enough. As we reached the edge of the field, the car skidded, unable to make the turn. I didn't look back. I knew we had to keep moving. The road to safety was still long, and the fight was far from over. I could feel the rush of relief as we sped across the open field, the sound of our bikes filling the air, growing fainter with each passing second. The black car was far behind us now, still stuck in the woods, unable to keep up on the rough terrain. But even as we rode free, the weight of the situation hung heavily over me. This wasn't over. We hadn't won yet. The woman and the little girl were safe for the moment, but they were still in danger. The road ahead was unclear, and I could feel the gnawing sense of urgency deep in my gut. I glanced over at the girl. Her face was pale, but there was a flicker of relief in her eyes as she clung to her mother. She was still scared, still in shock, but at least she wasn't alone anymore. "We need to get them somewhere safe," I said to the crew, my voice firm. "We can't keep running forever." The bikers nodded in agreement, their eyes sharp as they scanned the road ahead. We had to get out of town, get away from the people who were after us. The woman had told us enough to know that we couldn't trust anyone around here. "We'll head to the old motel by the highway," Jake suggested, his voice steady. "It's isolated, and no one ever goes there." It was the perfect place to lay low. We'd rest, regroup, and plan our next move. But there was no doubt in my mind that the people chasing us wouldn't let up. They would be looking for us, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. As we made our way toward the motel, I kept a sharp eye on the rearview mirror. The sun had risen now, casting a cold light over the empty highway. It felt like we were being watched. Every car, every movement on the road, made me uneasy. I knew the people behind us were still out there. "Stay alert," I muttered to the crew, trying to shake the sense of paranoia creeping in. The road ahead stretched on, endless, but it was the only path we had. After what seemed like hours, we finally reached the motel. The place was a rundown relic from another time, hidden away from the main roads. It looked abandoned, with its flickering neon sign and peeling paint, but it was perfect for what we needed. "Get them inside," I told Jake, as he led the woman and the girl toward the building. "Everyone else, check the perimeter." We had to make sure no one was following us, no one was watching. We couldn't afford any surprises. As the crew spread out, I took one last look at the surrounding area. The motel was tucked away behind a cluster of trees, surrounded by a field. The only road in was the one we had come down, and there was no sign of any other cars. For now, it seemed safe. I turned and walked toward the motel, pushing the door open. The interior was dimly lit, with old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs in the corners. It smelled musty, but it was quiet, and that was all we needed. Jake had already set the woman and the girl down on one of the beds, and the girl was curled up beside her, her eyes closed but still twitching in her sleep. The woman, on the other hand, was awake, her eyes haunted but grateful. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely, her voice trembling. "You don't know what you've done for us." I nodded, but I could feel the weight of the situation on my shoulders. "We're not done yet," I said, my voice low but filled with resolve. "We'll protect you, but we need to figure out who's behind this and why they're after you." The woman swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know," she said, her voice breaking. "They came for me, for my daughter. They said they needed us for something, but I don't know what. All I know is they've been watching us for months." My mind raced as I tried to piece together the fragments of information. This was bigger than just a kidnapping. Whoever was behind this had resources, power, and they weren't going to let go of their prize so easily. "They'll come for us," the woman whispered, her voice tinged with fear. "They'll come, and they won't stop until they have us." I didn't have an answer for her. We couldn't outrun them forever. But for now, we had a few hours of peace, a few hours to plan, to regroup, and to prepare for what was coming. "We'll be ready," I said firmly, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The door creaked open, and Bear stepped inside, his face grim. "We've got company," he said, his voice tight. My heart sank. I knew it wouldn't last. They had found us. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. I could feel the tension tighten as Bear's words hit the room like a thunderclap. "We've got company." My heart sank. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were supposed to have more time to plan, to figure out how to get out of town without anyone noticing. But now, the danger was closing in faster than I could process. I glanced over at Jake, who had his eyes fixed on the door, his jaw set in determination. "How many?" I asked, my voice low, but sharp. Bear's face was grim. "At least 4 cars. Maybe more. They're not here to chat." My mind raced. 4 cars? That meant more men, more firepower. This wasn't just a group of thugs. These were organized, and they weren't going to stop until they had the woman and the little girl. I turned to the woman, who was sitting on the bed, clutching her daughter tightly. The girl was still half asleep, her eyes swollen from the tears she had cried earlier, but she was awake enough to know that something was wrong. She looked at me with those big, terrified eyes. "You promised," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I knelt in front of her, my heart aching. "I know," I said softly, my voice steady. "I promised I would keep you safe, and I'm going to keep that promise. But we need to move fast. They're coming for us." She nodded, her small fingers gripping her mother's hand tighter. I turned back to my crew. "Get ready. We move in 5 minutes." There was no time to waste. The bikers were already securing the perimeter, checking for weak points, and setting up an escape route. We had to be quick, but we also had to be smart. We couldn't outrun them forever, but if we could get out of this motel and onto the main road, we might be able to lose them in the winding highways. The door to the room creaked as it opened, and Jake stepped inside, his face grim. "They're almost here," he said, his voice low and controlled. "We need to move now, or we're trapped." I nodded. "Let's go." We quickly gathered our things and made our way out of the room. The little girl was still clutching her mother's hand, her eyes darting nervously around the room. The woman, though visibly shaken, managed to keep her composure. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're heading for the main highway," I replied. "From there, we can make our way to the city. It's the best chance we've got." We moved as quietly as possible, slipping through the back door of the motel and into the alley behind it. The sound of footsteps in the gravel made my heart race. They were close. Too close. I motioned for the crew to spread out. Bear and Phantom took the lead, weapons ready, eyes scanning for any movement. Jake and I brought up the rear, making sure the woman and her daughter stayed close. We didn't have much time. As we reached the end of the alley, I saw the first car pull into the motel parking lot. The headlights lit up the area, casting long shadows across the ground. The car slowed, and I could see the men inside scanning the area. They weren't just looking for us, they were hunting us. I held my breath, signaling for everyone to freeze. The car came to a stop just a few feet away, its engine humming in the quiet night. The men inside had their eyes trained on the motel, not knowing we were just steps away. My heart pounded in my chest. We couldn't wait any longer. "Now," I hissed. We burst into action, moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Bear and Phantom led the charge, sprinting toward the bikes. Jake and I stayed behind, providing cover. I could hear the sound of the car doors opening, and I knew the men were about to realize they'd been spotted. A shot rang out in the distance, followed by a chorus of shouts. It was chaos. I pushed the woman and the little girl toward the bikes, urging them to move faster. "Get on the bike. Now." The woman hesitated for a moment, but the urgency in my voice pushed her into action. She helped her daughter onto the back of one of the bikes, then climbed onto another herself. I could feel the weight of the situation pushing down on me, but I didn't have time to think about it. I had to focus on getting them out of here, no matter what. "Go, go, go," I shouted, and the engines roared to life as the bikers sped off, tearing down the road as fast as we could. The sound of the gunshots grew fainter as we pulled away, but I knew we couldn't relax yet. The chase had only just begun. As we hit the open highway, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The road ahead was long, but I was determined to get us through it. We had to get away from here, out of the reach of the people chasing us. But deep down, I knew we weren't safe yet. There were still too many questions, and the answers were just out of reach. The further we got from the motel, the more determined I became. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting the people we cared about. We had made it this far, and we weren't going to stop now. I could feel the tension in the air as we sped down the highway, the roar of our bikes blending with the sound of the wind. We had gotten away, for now, but there was no relief in sight. The road ahead was long, but every mile felt like a countdown. The woman and the little girl were safe, at least for the moment, but I could see the fear still gripping their faces. The girl clung tightly to her mother, her eyes wide with the remnants of terror. I couldn't blame her. What they had gone through was unimaginable. The darkness of the night seemed to stretch on forever as we raced through the winding roads, keeping our eyes on the rearview mirrors, watching for any sign that the people chasing us were still behind. Every sound, every flicker of headlights made my heart race. We couldn't afford to let our guard down. Not now. How far are we from the next town? I asked Jake, who was riding beside me. About an hour, he replied, his voice low, focused. We'll be there soon, but we need to find somewhere to lay low. We can't keep riding like this. I nodded. He was right. We couldn't keep running forever. We needed a safe place to regroup, to figure out our next move. As we continued down the highway, the darkened landscape around us seemed endless. The occasional flicker of lights from distant houses was the only sign of life, and I knew that if we didn't get to safety soon, we'd be vulnerable. We couldn't afford to let our pursuers catch up. As we neared the outskirts of the next town, I signaled to the crew. Pull off the road, I said, keeping my voice low. We need to find a place to rest. The bikers followed my lead, veering off the main highway onto a smaller road that led toward a wooded area. It was quiet, secluded, perfect for what we needed. The small gravel road wound through the trees, and as we rode deeper into the woods, I finally allowed myself to exhale, though the fear still gnawed at me. The place felt safe, for now. We parked the bikes and dismounted, moving quickly but quietly as we gathered near the edge of the trees. Everyone stay sharp, I said, my voice still low. We don't know how close they are. We need to make sure we're not followed. Bear and Phantom moved to take position, scanning the surrounding area for any sign of danger. The woman and the little girl were still close behind, their eyes darting nervously as they watched the trees. We'll be fine, Jake said, his voice steady as he reassured them. We've got the place covered. I turned to the woman. How are you holding up? She met my gaze, her face pale, but her voice steady. I'm okay, she said softly. But my daughter, she's scared. She keeps asking when it will be over. I looked over at the little girl, who was huddled against her mother, her eyes wide, searching the shadows. My heart broke for her. No child should ever have to go through something like this. We're doing everything we can to keep you safe, I said, my voice filled with resolve. No one's going to hurt you. The little girl looked up at me, her eyes filled with silent fear, but there was a flicker of hope there too. Promise? She whispered. I promise, I said, my voice firm. We'll get you both out of here. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. She nodded slowly, as if trying to believe me, but I could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. The woman gave me a weak smile, but I could see the worry still in her expression. She was trying to stay strong for her daughter, but I could tell it was taking a toll on her. The past few hours had been nothing short of a nightmare for both of them. I couldn't imagine what they had gone through. I turned back to my crew, signaling for us to get ready. We had no idea how long we could stay here before someone found us. The sound of an engine in the distance made my heart race again. Was it them? I couldn't tell, but I knew we couldn't take any chances. We need to get moving, I said, my voice tense. We can't stay here. Where do we go? Jake asked, his expression serious. I paused for a moment, weighing our options. We'll head to the old cabin out by the river. It's off the grid, secluded. We should be able to lay low there for a while. Jake nodded. All right, let's move. We quickly gathered our things and mounted our bikes, ready to ride again. As I revved my engine and we rode back onto the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. But I wasn't about to let that stop us. The night was still young, and the road ahead was long, but I was determined to get us to safety. We rode in silence, the sound of the engines filling the air, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. The woman and the little girl were counting on us, and I wasn't about to let them down. I could feel the weight of every second passing as we tore through the winding roads, the night air thick with tension. We had been riding for hours, pushing our bikes to the limit, but it didn't feel like we were getting any closer to safety. The cabin by the river was still a long way off, and with every passing minute, the fear of being followed crept deeper into my mind. The woman and her daughter were still holding on tight, their faces pale in the glow of the bike's headlights. I could see the exhaustion in their eyes, and it made me question whether they could keep going much longer. I glanced back at Jake, who was riding behind me. His face was set in a grim line, his eyes scanning the road ahead. He could feel it too, this heavy, suffocating weight that seemed to hang over us. We need to make it to the cabin soon, Jake muttered, his voice cutting through the wind. We can't keep running like this. I nodded, but deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. We had just made it out of one danger, but we were heading straight into another. The people who were after us weren't going to give up that easily. They had resources, connections, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get their hands on the woman and her daughter. I could feel the tension building, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting to protect the people who were counting on me. The cabin was supposed to be our safe haven, but how long could we stay there before they found us? How long before this nightmare caught up with us? We had no answers, just the road ahead, and the hope that we could outrun whatever was chasing us. Almost there, I said, my voice strained, trying to keep the anxiety from creeping into my tone. Just a little farther. But as the words left my mouth, a loud screech of tires cut through the silence. My heart skipped a beat as I instinctively swerved my bike, barely avoiding a collision. I looked back, my blood running cold. The headlights of a car were closing in fast. They had found us. Get ready, I shouted, my voice sharp and urgent. We can't outrun them anymore. The crew immediately sprang into action. Bear and Phantom peeled off to the side, taking cover behind the trees, while the rest of us revved our engines and readied ourselves for whatever was coming next. The car was almost on top of us now, its headlights blinding. I could see the outline of the driver, a man behind the wheel with a look of cold determination. He wasn't stopping. They're not going to let us go that easy, I muttered, gripping my handlebars tighter. We were out of time. We couldn't outrun them, and there was no place left to hide. We had to fight. The car screeched to a halt just a few feet away, and the door swung open. 3 men spilled out, each of them armed, each of them looking like they were ready for war. End of the line, one of them said, his voice cold, his eyes hard. Give us the girl, and nobody gets hurt. I stood my ground, my fists clenched. You want her? I said, my voice steady, but my heart was racing. You'll have to go through us first. The bikers lined up beside me, ready to fight. We weren't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The men laughed, the sound cold and mocking. You think you're going to stop us? We've got more men on the way. I didn't hesitate. I motioned for the crew to move in. We had the element of surprise, but we wouldn't have it for long. We had to act fast. The first shot rang out, and everything erupted into chaos. The sound of gunfire filled the air, followed by the roar of motorcycles as we swerved and dodged, returning fire as quickly as we could. Bear took out one of the men with a well-placed shot, but the other 2 were still advancing. I could see the woman and the little girl behind us, huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. Stay down, I shouted, making sure they were out of the line of fire. My heart was pounding as I ducked behind a tree for cover. The men were closing in, but we weren't going down without a fight. The tension in the air was unbearable as I fired back, the bullets missing by inches. I could hear the men yelling, moving to flank us. But we were prepared. This wasn't our first fight, and it wouldn't be our last. We need to end this now. Jake yelled. We've got the upper hand. I nodded, signaling to Bear to make a move. With one swift motion, Bear rushed the remaining men, knocking them to the ground in a flash. We had them cornered now. The fight was over, but the danger wasn't. We still had to get out of here. Let's move, I shouted. We're not done yet. We quickly mounted our bikes, the woman and her daughter riding with us, and took off down the road. The car that had chased us was now a distant memory, but I knew this wasn't the end. The road ahead was uncertain, but we were going to keep moving, keep fighting, and we weren't going to stop until we were safe. I could feel my pulse racing as we sped down the road, the engines of our bikes roaring in unison, cutting through the night air like a relentless force. The adrenaline was still high from the fight, but there was no time to relax. We had won that skirmish, but the real battle was far from over. The woman and her daughter were with us, safe for now, but they still had no idea who was behind all of this, and that uncertainty gnawed at me. As we continued down the dark, winding roads, the tension hung thick in the air. The headlights of the bikes illuminated the asphalt ahead, but the world around us seemed to close in, the trees on both sides casting long shadows that made every movement feel ominous. We had to get to the cabin. We had to keep moving. How far? I called to Jake, who was riding beside me. About 15 miles, he replied, his voice steady, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. We'll make it, but we need to stay sharp. We're not stopping, I said firmly. Not until we get there. The road stretched on, endless and dark, but there was a strange calm in the air now. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, though. Every flicker of light, every shadow seemed to be a reminder that we weren't safe yet. I glanced in the rearview mirror. No sign of any vehicles following us, but that didn't mean we were out of danger. They could be waiting, planning their next move. Stay close, I said to the crew, my voice low. We're not out of the woods yet. Just as I finished speaking, a sound cut through the quiet night, a car engine. I immediately tensed. It wasn't the sound of a motorcycle. It was heavier, slower, and it was coming up fast. My heart skipped a beat. They're here, I muttered under my breath. The car was getting closer, its headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the trees and the road ahead. I didn't need to see who was driving. I already knew. The same black car from before was closing in on us. Get ready, I barked, my voice tight with urgency. They're not going to stop. We weren't going to outrun them this time. There was nowhere left to hide. I could see the outline of the car in the rearview mirror, its headlights growing brighter by the second. We needed to make a decision, and fast. We can't fight them here, Jake said, his voice sharp. We've got to make it to the cabin. Now. The urgency in his voice made it clear there was no time for a confrontation. We had to keep moving. I revved my engine, pushing the bike to its limits as we tore down the road, hoping the car would fall behind. But it didn't. It was gaining on us, faster now. My mind raced. We were too exposed on this open road. There was nowhere to turn, no place to lose them. We need a plan, I said, trying to think quickly. We can't outrun them on this road. We have to take the shortcut. Jake's eyes flicked over to me, understanding instantly. It's risky, but we don't have a choice. I nodded. Head to the right. There's a trail that cuts through the woods. Without hesitation, we swerved to the side, taking the sharp turn onto a narrow, gravel path. The car behind us followed, but its speed was compromised by the rough terrain. The trail was tight, winding through trees and over rocks, but the bikes could handle it. We had the advantage here. I pushed my bike harder, the engine roaring as we dodged trees and rocks. The car's headlights grew fainter behind us, its engine struggling to keep up on the rough trail. They're falling behind, Jake called out, his voice filled with a mix of relief and caution. But we couldn't let our guard down yet. The trail stretched on, but the trees around us were closing in, the path narrowing with every turn. If we went too fast, we'd risk losing control. If we went too slow, the car would catch up. There was no middle ground. We need to lose them for good, I said, my voice tight with concentration. Get ready to take another turn. The bikers responded without a word, staying in formation, their focus sharp. I could feel the tension building as we sped through the forest, our bike's headlights cutting through the trees. And then, just as I thought we might have lost them for good, I heard it. The screech of tires as the car made the turn behind us. They weren't giving up. We had no choice but to push forward. The forest opened up ahead, revealing a clearing with a steep incline. I didn't hesitate. Follow me, I shouted. We hit the incline at full speed, the bikes bouncing as we tore up the hill. The car was still behind us, but now they were struggling to follow. The incline was too steep, the terrain too rough. I looked over my shoulder, and for the first time, I saw the car pull back, its headlights flickering as it struggled to make the climb. We've got them, I muttered, though I knew this wasn't over yet. We still had to make it to the cabin. But for now, we had a moment of relief. We had escaped the chase. And for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to breathe. The cabin was just ahead, and we were almost there. I could feel my heart pounding as we finally reached the clearing, the cabin just a few hundred yards ahead. The rough ride through the forest had been exhausting, but we had made it. The car chasing us had fallen behind, struggling on the steep incline, but I knew better than to think it was over. They were persistent, and if they had the resources to find us once, they could do it again. We pulled up to the cabin, the sound of the engines dying down as we came to a stop. I glanced over at the woman and her daughter, who were still holding onto each other in the back. They looked exhausted, but there was a flicker of relief in their eyes. For now, at least, they were safe. We're here, I said, trying to reassure them. You're safe now. The woman didn't respond right away. She just nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. I could tell she was still processing everything, still trying to make sense of the nightmare they had been through. I motioned to the crew. Let's get inside and secure the place. We're not taking any chances. We quickly dismounted and made our way toward the cabin, our boots crunching against the gravel. The cabin itself was small and weathered, tucked away in the woods, hidden from the main roads. It was the perfect place to lay low. But even as we stepped inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I turned to Jake, who had already started checking the perimeter. "We need to be ready for anything," I said, my voice low but firm. "They'll come looking for us. It's just a matter of time." Jake nodded, his expression serious. "We'll keep watch. But we need to rest. We're running on fumes here." I agreed. We had been on the move for hours, fighting, fleeing, and now, we needed a moment to regroup. But even as I settled into the cabin, I couldn't fully relax. There were still too many unknowns. Who were these people? Why were they after the woman and her daughter? What did they want from them? And why hadn't they given up yet? As I stood by the window, looking out into the dark woods, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on my shoulders. "We'll make a plan in the morning," I said, more to myself than anyone else. "For now, we rest. But stay alert. No one leaves until we know it's safe." The crew set up a watch, taking turns to ensure that we wouldn't be caught off guard. The woman and the little girl were given the bedroom to rest in, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy for either of them. The little girl had barely spoken since we left the motel, her face still pale, her eyes wide with fear. I couldn't imagine what she had been through, and I knew the woman was carrying the weight of that fear as well. I walked over to the door, glancing out into the dark forest. The quiet of the cabin was deceiving. It was too still, too perfect for hiding. I couldn't help but think that it wouldn't be long before someone came looking for us. The night stretched on, every minute feeling like an eternity. I could hear the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, but in the silence, the sound of my own thoughts grew louder. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of those men, the ones who had tried to stop us, the ones who had been so determined to take the woman and the girl. It wasn't just about money or power. There was something else driving them, something deeper, darker. I didn't know what it was yet, but I was going to find out. The sound of a bike engine in the distance broke my thoughts. My heart skipped a beat, but it was only the rest of the crew taking their turn to patrol the area. For a moment, I felt a flicker of relief. But then, that nagging feeling crept back. We were safe for now, but I knew it wouldn't last long. The crew would keep watch, but I had to keep my guard up too. This wasn't over. The storm was coming, and we were right in the middle of it. The morning light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the cabin's worn floorboards. I stood by the window, staring out into the vast woods, my thoughts racing. The night had been quiet, too quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't stay that way for long. The woman and her daughter had finally found some peace, but we knew it wasn't the end of the road. I turned as Jake walked in, his face grim but determined. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said quietly, reading my thoughts. "No," I replied, my voice low. "But we have to figure out our next move, fast." He nodded, his eyes scanning the room, as if expecting danger to come through the door at any moment. "We can't stay here for long," he continued. "They'll track us down. It's just a matter of time." "I know," I said, clenching my fists. "We need to hit them first." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You think we can take them down? We don't even know who they are, or what they want." I shook my head, frustration building inside me. "I don't care what they want. They're after innocent people, and we're not going to let them get away with it." The sound of footsteps echoed in the cabin, and Bear entered the room, followed by Phantom. Both of them were as tense as I felt, their expressions unreadable. "We've been out on patrol," Bear said, his voice low. "No signs of movement yet. But it won't be long before they start searching this area. We need to move soon." I nodded, grateful for the information. "We're not running anymore. We're going to take the fight to them." Phantom looked at me, his expression hard. "How do you plan on doing that?" I turned to him, my mind already racing through the possibilities. "We'll head to the city. I've got some old contacts there. They owe me, and I'm going to call in a favor. We get the information we need, and we hit them where it hurts." Bear nodded in agreement. "It's risky, but it might be our only shot." The woman and her daughter had been resting in the bedroom, but now they were up, the girl still clinging to her mother, her eyes wide with uncertainty. The woman looked exhausted, but she stood tall. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. "We're going to finish this," I said firmly, my voice steady. "We'll find out who's behind all of this, and we'll make sure they never hurt anyone again." She nodded, but I could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. "I just want my daughter to be safe," she said softly. "We're doing everything we can," I reassured her. "I promise." The sound of engines in the distance interrupted the moment. My heart skipped a beat. I turned to Jake. Get ready. They're here. We all moved into position, securing the cabin and checking our weapons. It wasn't much, but it was all we had. We waited in silence, the tension so thick it felt like it could suffocate us. The engines grew louder, and I could hear the crunch of tires on gravel. They're here, Jake whispered, his eyes narrowing. Stay quiet. Let's see how many they brought. The door to the cabin suddenly crashed open, and 3 men stormed inside, guns drawn. I think you've made a big mistake, one of them sneered. You're not leaving here alive. I didn't hesitate. We'll see about that, I said, my voice steady. Without warning, I lunged forward, catching one of the men off guard. I grabbed his arm, twisting it, and using his momentum to throw him to the floor. The other 2 men reacted quickly, but they weren't fast enough. Bear and Phantom were already on the move, charging at the other 2 attackers with ruthless efficiency. The fight was quick, but brutal. We were outnumbered, but we had the advantage of surprise. The men didn't stand a chance. Within moments, all 3 of them were down, lying unconscious on the floor. I stood over them, my chest heaving, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This isn't over, I said, my voice cold. We need to get to the city now. The crew quickly gathered their things, making sure the woman and her daughter were safe. We couldn't waste any more time. As we headed out the door, I looked back at the cabin one last time. We had made it this far, but the war wasn't over. It had just begun. With the woman and her daughter now under our protection, we couldn't stop until the people behind this were taken down. The road ahead would be dangerous, but we were ready. We had each other, and we had a purpose, and no one was going to stop us. In this thrilling story, we dive deep into a series of heart-pounding events that take place when a group of Hell Angels are faced with a dangerous mission to protect a woman and her daughter from a ruthless gang. As the Hell Angels fight for survival, they make their way through one intense moment after another, revealing the true meaning of loyalty, family, and sacrifice. The relentless pursuit by dangerous enemies pushes them to the edge, but with unwavering resolve, they take on every obstacle that comes their way. From high-speed chases through treacherous terrain to confrontations that could change their lives forever, these Hell Angels are faced with unimaginable odds. As the story unfolds, we see the personal struggles and bonds formed within the Hell Angels, each character dealing with their own demons while protecting those they care about. Their journey showcases what it means to live with honor and to fight for what's right, no matter the cost. Through every twist and turn, we witness firsthand the strength and resilience of the Hell Angels. This story of courage, survival, and the fight against darkness will leave you captivated and eager to hear more Hell Angel stories. Their actions speak louder than words, and the depth of their loyalty and bravery shines through in every decision they make. In the face of overwhelming danger, they never back down, showing us the true meaning of brotherhood. Hell Angel stories are not just about survival. They are about standing up against injustice and fighting for those who cannot protect themselves. With their backs against the wall, the Hell Angels will stop at nothing to ensure the safety of those who have been wronged. Join us as we uncover the untold stories of the Hell Angels, where danger lurks at every corner and the stakes are higher than ever. From their fearless leader to each brave member, this story delivers everything you expect from Hell Angel stories: action, emotion, and a fight for what is right.